everybody, Joe from Treadmill Heroes here, and today we have kind of a special day. We are unearthing a Sole F85 treadmill from the shop. I don't even know what's wrong with this thing. It's been sitting around forever. As a matter of fact, we have a matching pair of them. So I figured, well, why not go live and actually try to diagnose this treadmill live with anybody who might be at home that has a Sole F85. This is going to be applicable to the F63 and what are some of the other ones? I can't even remember. A bunch of Sole treadmills.
F80, F63, pretty much any of the Sole lineup.
Great. So here we are. We've got this thing powered on. I'm going to hop up on the table here and hit start. And I'm going to grab the camera here and show you guys what the screen looks like. So I'm just going to hit the start button. We're going to get a countdown, 3, 2, 1. And very little belt movement. So I'm going to push it with my foot. And there the belt started moving. So if the belt, and right away as I walk on this, here, if we want to get a shot of that down below, I can very easily stop the belt. How common of an issue is this data on Sole treadmills?
Fairly common. It's when that running belt starts wearing out. If you look close, you can see a bunch of cracks all over the surface of it as well.
So I can tell right away, once we put a load on this thing, it bogs way down.
You can also kind of hear motor bearings.
So right away, I think it's safe to say that this thing needs a new motor, but let's dive into this thing. Data, if you wouldn't mind pulling the motor hood off of this thing. So we're going to take a look and see what's going on with the motor. Now, this, I can already tell you right now, based on the condition of the belt, we would never resell this treadmill like this. So if we're even going to have a chance of turning this thing into some cash, we're going to have to put a new running belt on it. And while Data's taking off the motor hood, look at this thing right here. So this underneath side of the belt should be pearly white, and it is not. At minimum, it should be like a nice color gray, but I'm already getting, if I run my finger underneath there, I'm already getting debris on my fingers from this. And look at the inside of this. This is why general maintenance is so important. Once a month, you should vacuum out your treadmill hood. Because when you think about it, as the belt moves this way, and then the belt rotates up, all that dust and debris that's stuck on the belt gets flung underneath of the motor hood here, and it's going to collect. So this certainly needs a good cleaning, and we'll get into that. So let's find out what's going on with that motor. I'd like to do an amp draw test on this thing to kind of see how many amps this thing is pulling out of the wall. In other words, how much juice is that motor requiring to make the belt move at a consistent basis? Data, why don't you talk to everyone about how many amps a normal treadmill in a home should be pulling?
So a normal treadmill in a home, assuming everything is in great shape and it's brand new, is between 4 and 6 amps. If it's drawing less than that, that could indicate a separate issue. We'll discuss more on that later. But if everything is as it should be, you should be drawing around 4 to 6 amps.
Okay, so how do we, so this is kind of a standard multimeter, right, with a clamp. Show them where to put the meter on.
So you want to set that meter on amperage. Mine is AC and DC most likely. It'll just have the squiggly line there, but it's that. It'll look about like that. And what you want to do is you want to put it on the black wire. In most cases, in some cases I've seen them use red as well, but 90% of the time it'll be the black wire.
Be the hot wire. Okay, so I'm going to hit start again up top and walk on this. And a good rule is at 3 miles an hour with a load. Boy, that thing's loud. Sounds like an airplane taking off. I'm actually going to take my microphone off so you can hear it. And this, the noise that you're hearing is most likely some bad rusty bearings. So now as I walk on this thing at 3 miles an hour, watch how the meter jumps. Okay. What are you seeing, Data?
About around 8.5. Yeah, but there we go. It's not wanting any more of it.
Okay. So first things first, we have to determine, one, where is that noise coming from? Because we know that the motor at this point should be replaced. It's just not, the motor for whatever reason just isn't strong enough, and we're going to need to replace the running belt as well. But we have to figure out.
So one way that you can determine that, if you have a tool similar to this, it's just metal all the way through. It will allow you to hear anything that's going on. So what you would do is you would put it on the surface that you believe the noise might be coming from, and you would listen to it. That does not sound like it's it. Here, I'll put my microphone right next to it. Not really a whole lot coming from that. Now that motor there, I'll put it right next to it again. Probably heard that pretty loud. That is definitely the bearing on that motor going out. And one thing that contributes to that we were talking about earlier is all of this inside of the motor cover. This will eventually work its way into the bearings and into the inside of the motor. There's a fan on the back that cools it down. However, what it does if you don't clean out your treadmill is just blows all of that dirt and debris into the motor.
So in other words, if we took an air hose, which we'll do this, not here in the shop because it'll make a heck of a mess. If you're fortunate enough to have an air hose at your house with a little spray nozzle, if we sprayed that into there while this thing is running, you won't believe the amount of dust and debris that goes flying out of there. And that can cause the motor to short out and have all kinds of problems. So now that we've determined that we definitely have some some bearings in this motor, it's not going to be very cost efficient to tear this thing apart, order bearings, try to press new bearings in this motor unless you've got a bearing press and all those other things. But we need to find out if these roller bearings are making some noise too. And an easy way to do that is if we push this, we can hear some noise. But let's go ahead and take the belt off, this drive belt. And you can just roll that off here. Just don't get your fingy in there. Little alligator will take a bite out of it. You can roll this stretchy belt right off of there. Now if we give it a spin, woo.
Definitely a lot of noise coming from that rear roller as well.
So what we've done is we've eliminated the motor from the equation and we still have noise. So we know we at least have a bad rear roller there. So what I'd love to do is remove the rear roller. Let's take the rear roller off of this. And okay, we got a few people live saying they can't hear anything. So we're going to try to fix that right now. And let's see if we've got some juice here. Hey, I've got some people watching the video right now. Can you give us a thumbs up or give us a comment if you can hear the actual audio in the video, or you can't hear the noise that the bearing is making? Because if you can't hear the noise the bearing's making, we can get the microphone a little bit closer. In fact, let's do that anyway. Let's take the microphone here and put it down towards the rear roller here. That's some noise that is definitely not normal. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the running belt, or we're going to remove the rear roller, so see if we have noise just coming from the rear roller and not the front.
Want to grab that drill there?
Yeah. And I will say, the Sole brand itself is a good brand. You know, if you want a decent treadmill on a budget, these guys are great. So you just need to make sure you can find a local service provider that can work on these things if you need something. A lot of big box stores will sell these, and actually getting a service provider to your house can be kind of a challenge. So you just want to make sure you've got a local provider that can work on these. So what you're seeing right now is Data's taken off the rear roller. And we know this rear roller is shot. We can tell from the noise that it's making. The bearings are bad. A lot of times you can just replace the bearings in these. Certainly a bearing press helps. Or usually the cost of a new rear roller isn't that bad. So I'm going to pull my mic off and see if you can hear the noise of this rear roller.
Yeah, give a comment if you can hear any of that.
Boy, that's noisy. Definitely not normal. And hairy.
And hairy.
And very hairy. We're going to look at the underneath side of this belt here. And you can see, Data, walk us through what we're seeing underneath of here.
So the majority of this belt doesn't look too bad. It definitely looks like it's been run without lubricant for a while. If you go really close here, you can also see that by the deck. All these lines in there etched into it.
And it's just the pores in the belt are clogged from dirt and debris and whatever else. So now what I want to do is decide, is our front roller making noise? And what you can do is you can hook the drive belt back up and just run the front roller without the whole belt, the whole running belt moving. Roll this on, Data, and I'm going to check and see if we've got some audio here.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the treadmill, just let it start up the way it usually would. As you can see there, without the running belt attached, the motor starts right up. You hear that little bit of noise coming from that. I'll put my microphone right up to it. Most of that's probably coming from the motor itself. Now what I'll do is I'll turn up the speed a little bit, go to our 3 miles an hour.
So now what I'll do is I will bring this down close so you can hear the drive motor. And that high-pitched humming or that high-pitched whining noise is the bearing inside the drive motor.
Now earlier I had mentioned about how a low amp draw could be an indication of an error or an issue with your treadmill. So what's happening here, another indication is a noise coming that you can hear from the electronics of the motor. The easiest way to determine that is with the low amp draw. So despite the belt stopping when stepped on, it has an amp draw of under 10 amps. That indicates a weak drive motor. In other words, what happens when you run the treadmill without lubricant for long enough, the motor gets hot enough that it actually weakens the magnets on the inside of it. And then it can't push the tread belt with as much torque as it should.
So next up, we'll hit stop here. Actually, while we have it running, let's test the lift motor. Because who knows the last time the Incline was used on this thing. And in typical fashion, the side toggle switches don't work. Up top here, I can show you. Up top here, we've got these handlebar toggles. That should adjust the elevation up top, or the speed, or vice versa. Nothing. It's a common issue with Sole and Spirit treadmills. It doesn't mean they're a bad tread. This is just where a lot of sweat and debris drip down, and these things they just go bad. thankfully, there's a couple other ways that you can adjust the elevation and speed. I'll just do it right here on the console. So currently I'm elevating it up. Incline motor is moving. You can see that right there. That's the worm gear turning. And by the way, if I can give you a little tip from experience, you should grease up that worm gear right there with just some standard, any kind of standard grease works. But do not put a dollop of grease on your finger and hold it on the worm gear while it turns. That worm gear is full of little tiny metal shavings from going up and down in that barrel. And unless you want to be picking splinters out of your finger for the next half an hour, just lift it all the way up, expose the worm gear, coat it, and then spin the worm gear down. Have you ever had a splinter like that? Or am I the only idiot who does that? So now I'm elevating it back down. That seems to be fine. The lift motor is good. And when was the last time you changed a lift motor in a Sole treadmill? Not very often.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's not a common issue with that. Typically, for whatever reason, these motors just need replaced. And a lot of times it's just due to general maintenance. It's not that that's a bad drive motor. Most people just don't do proper maintenance on their tread, and then you have issues with what you were talking about before, Data. Let's cut this belt off. Let's show what the deck looks like. Okay, here we have what used to be a perfectly good running belt, not anymore. And here's our deck. Now, I don't know what that is, a little piece of the belt there. But if you can see these grooves in the deck, that's where your feet hit, and it drags. And eventually, I've heard this slick surface called different things, Data. What do you call it?
Oh, I just call it.
Is it just the melamine? It's like it's basically a plasticky type surface that is, it's a very thin plastic surface that's glued onto just a piece of wood, usually about a 1-inch thick piece of wood. And that allows that belt to glide smoothly across here. But if the belt's dry, you start to get this scarring in there. And once it eats through this, it's a done deal, because you're going to get down into the wood and she's all over.
This is another indication right here that this deck must have gotten pretty hot. You see,
Come look
that
here.
surface is actually cracked. These are cracks inside of that surface.
And every time your belt goes over just that little discrepancy, it's going to start eating away at the belt. And you can kind of see, well, like heck, even if you see this big scar piece right here. In other words, a common mistake that people make is, oh, I just need a new belt. And they don't put a new deck on. And you run a new belt on an old deck, this deck that already has scarring in it is going to toast this thing. So we're going to pull this belt out of here. Now some people might see some trash here because this thing is dirty and old and everything else, but there are some very good viable components, mainly the motor control board here. This motor control board will fit in multiple Sole units. So if you're kind of a DIYer and you have a Sole treadmill or even a Spirit treadmill at home and it's not running properly and you're able to determine that you need this motor control board, what is that? $250, $300, somewhere in there?
Yep.
You can sometimes buy a used treadmill on Facebook Marketplace for $50 that maybe has a bad belt, that you just need that. It's money well spent. Pull the motor control board out and throw the rest of the thing away. That's what I'd do. Let's look at this roller here. How can people clean this?
So, normal wear and tear, you would just use something like a steel wool. However, this, from sitting for a while and You can tell everywhere except for where it wasn't touching the running belt.
So yeah, you can tell this thing has sat stable for a long time. There was some moisture that got in on the back side here, and this is what was pressing it. More than likely it sat like this, where the belt was tight up against there, and there was some moisture in that belt, and that's what got all this to rust. But you can clean this fairly easily with a little bit of steel wool and, you know, some other cleaner. And this will just scrape right off with like an old hotel room key. What is this black stuff? Is that just melted plastic from the deck?
Yeah, that's the material from the deck mixed with the lubricant that would have been applied to it.
Yeah. So in other words, user did not properly lubricate the treadmill. The plastic slick surface on the deck got so hot, it started melting, and then it adheres to the steel roller. Wild. Okay. I want to get this thing back up and running though, and so I think we need to pull the motor out of it because we're going to at least, does this motor feel strong enough that we should try and rebuild it, or we need to get a new one?
We need to get a new one. Once the magnets start to lose their magnetism, there's no reusing that.
Let's show them how to pull the motor out.
All right.
Okay. So while Data's rounding up some tools, I'm going to roll this drive belt back off. And there again, the drive belt rolling off is fairly easy. Kind of pull it towards you here and just skip over one little rib at a time. Many of these belts are designed to stretch. So you can roll this off just like this. And by the way, if you're going to go to the work of putting on a new running belt, order a new drive belt. These things will get all full of gunk and stuff, and they'll crack. For a small price of probably about 40 bucks, you can get yourself a drive belt. Okay, go ahead, Data.
Now, since we're taking the motor out, doing anything with the electronics, we need to turn the treadmill off and unplug it. Doesn't take any time and prevents you from damaging other components, such as the motor control board.
So right now, Data is loosening up a jam nut in there. That just holds the tension bolt in place. So this is a tension bolt right there, and that's designed to push the motor back to snug up the drive belt right here. So once this is loose, now Data can loosen up the anchor bolts that are holding the bracket in place. This aluminum bracket right here is attached from the bottom side up to the drive motor. And then you anchor the aluminum bracket down to the frame. I was looking for your snips, Data, but it's kind of strange looking through another man's toolbox. It's kind of like looking through a woman's purse. It just feels weird. So Data's going to snip the zip ties right here that go from the drive motor. So in this case, you have a red and a white wire. Now, I will say, with the Sole and the Spirit treadmills, this can be kind of confusing. Most drive motor wires have a black and a red wire, kind of like a car battery, right? You have a positive and a negative, but they choose to use a red and a white one. But also, they use a white neutral wire, which makes sense. That's the power source that goes into the motor control board. Make sure you don't switch the white wire from the drive motor on the motor control board to the white wire for the power, because what you're going to end up doing is, well, you'll fry everything and you're done though. Okay, so now we're pulling out.
We should be free here.
There we go. So let's set him right here and take a look at him. So here, look right inside of here. Even though this fan is great, this fan is designed to dissipate heat, right? Because this pulls the heat out.
Let's take that fan off and look how caked
There we go.
the motor is with dust. see all that in there.
Don't stick your finger in there while it's running.
Or plugged in.
Look at that. And if we blew an air hose in here, you'd get just tons of this gunk. This contributed to the motor shorting, which by just monthly vacuuming of the motor hood can alleviate a lot of these things. And by the way, if you have a shop vac, in some cases you can put it on reverse and you can turn Mega Made from suck to blow, and you can blow this out by just sticking your shop vac hose up next to there and clean it out.
Another thing that I like to look at on these is the motor brushes.
Yeah, come in close here. Explain to what we're looking at here.
So what we're looking at, there are, in a DC motor, and you never want to do this while the treadmill is plugged in. There's always current going to the motor. These brushes are very short compared to what they should be. This, usually on a drive motor, you would see the brush come probably about a quarter of an inch taller than what it is.
Yeah, it'd be sticking way up higher than that.
These particular ones are screwed in, so I'll unscrew that.
Oh, we got lucky there. A screw fell all the way through.
Yeah, you see there's a part number on there. There's supposed to be a whole other number right there. And we can see some etching there.
Is there a way you can explain to the layman out there what this actually does and how it makes the motor go?
So inside of this motor, well, we have it here. We may as well take the whole motor apart.
Okay, fine.
Not reusing
Deal.
it
We're
anyway.
not going to keep this motor anyway. This is kind of fun, dissecting a whole treadmill motor. We're gonna. Here, you want me to hold that on down there?
Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna. There we go.
Wow, that actually kind of cooperated. There we go. Inside of a Sole Treadmill motor.
So on these motors, what you'd have is a north and south pole. These bars here correlate to each other on the opposite side of the motor, and it creates a magnetic field that pushes against these permanent magnets inside of the motor. These permanent ones are the ones that are weakened by the heat. Usually it's this bearing on the end that's bad as well. I'm gonna put your microphone next to that.
Yeah, I can put my microphone up to that. I think it's fairly quiet, right?
So you can't really hear it without their... You can hear just a little bit of grit inside of there, but that going through the whole casing of the motor creates a lot more noise.
Yeah, it's basically an empty cavern in here, so it'll echo.
The other thing you notice is on these bars, the beginning of them is completely charred up.
Oh yeah, look right there. Yeah, there's a bunch of burn marks on there.
Here we have one that's all rough. Just a singular one, and that's all it takes to make one of these incredibly weak. That's about what you'd see of a motor that's been used for a long time, but oh yeah, feel that one. That one's
Yeah,
really rough.
right there. Obviously you can't feel it, but this is extremely rough. It's very gritty, whereas some of these points are very smooth. And just that, like Data was saying, that one gritty spot is going to weaken the motor. And it's not like you can replace this part. This is, it's the heart and soul of this motor. So if that's bad, it's a done deal. Even if you go to the work of replacing the bearings, she ain't going to make the motor any stronger. It might make it quieter, but you're still going to have a weak motor. So that now calls for a motor, and it's a good time to make a quick plug. If you need parts, visit fitnessgraveyard.com or visit treadhero.com. We can get you all the parts you need. We can help troubleshoot any problems you might have to help you get back up and going. So, and if ultimately you can't get it fixed, we can always drop ship you a new treadmill and find you a local service provider to take care of you for the next day and the next 10 years and anywhere in between. So let's dive back in here to this thing. Let's talk about this motor control board. So, as a matter of fact, can you walk through some of the plugins on that motor control board, Data? And I'm going to go grab one of the motor control boards I just took out of that Spirit treadmill the other day.
All right. So, right here, we'll undo this zip tie, just get all of the wires unbunched. Don't have a pair of snips. I'm using there we go, using the pliers there. These three are the voltage for the incline motor. White is common, black is down, and red is up. Just kind of how they are inside of there. A lot of them don't have it in that exact same position. They'll have the common on the bottom. But most Sole, Spirit, most of those treadmills have them exactly the way they work. Spirit is one of those brands that really does like to use hot glue as well. You have to be careful when you're taking these off of there, not to rip the connector off the board.
And while Data is taking off that hot glue on that motor control board, here's a little known thing that the average consumer does not realize. The brand Sole and the brand Spirit are effectively two of the same. And they use a lot of universal parts on their treadmills. So you can sometimes take a part that belongs on a Spirit treadmill and put it on a Sole and vice versa. This is a Sole treadmill motor control board. And it, as you can see, is very similar to that. However, there are some differences where this one isn't compatible. This one happened to come out of a Spirit XT375. They look close, but they won't work. At least I don't think they will, Data, or will they?
No.
We don't have the same hookups. But in some cases, they are. And you can always reach out to Treadmill Heroes, treadhero.com, or give us a call, and we'll let you know if you have compatible parts.
So these three, common, down, and up. You have the ground that goes for the whole entire motor, since it is an AC motor. And then this here, if you're receiving an incline error after having an incline motor replaced or after replacing one yourself, this here could be why you're having that error. This goes to a potentiometer inside of here. And since we're tearing this apart, I'll just open that up and show you. It goes to this potentiometer right here. This is what tells the motor control board and your console what position your incline motor is at. So if you don't use your incline motor very much and you go to use it one time and it stalls out or gives your treadmill an error, that's most likely why.
So when the white is the common wire
On
this.
On the main power here.
And on the pod here, this will read either however many revelations up and however many revelations down.
Correct.
Right? So is there a way you can test if your pod is good through this little 3-pin wire here? Is this where they add up to the same point value, or is that just in the testing of the main wires to the lift motor?
So that would also be in this if it is a potentiometer style. Let me grab that multimeter and we'll test it real quick.
So let's just pretend you have some lift motor issues. And maybe it's not moving at all and you're getting a lift motor error when you go to change the elevation of the tread to go up and down. So what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to test out this potentiometer wire harness here, because we know the lift motor works on this because we tested it before we started diving in too deep here. So you have these 3 little metal ends here, and I'm just going to hold it for Data, and Data can walk us through here what we're doing.
So we want to test them both against the common here. And as you can see, in the lowest position, we have 1.3
And what do you have your meter set on?
ohms. You want it to be set on ohms there. It'll have that symbol there.
The little horseshoe looking thing.
Yep.
So we went from black to white, and it was 1.3. White to red, we have
8.6.
8.6.
And then if you go black to red, you should have a combination of the two.
9.9. So in other words, 2 values should always add up to the big value.
Yes.
And then you know your potentiometer is good, so then you know at least that part of the lift motor isn't bad. You can't just replace the potentiometer. You're not going to be able to call up the manufacturer, any parts supplier, and they're going to be able to send you this part, because it's kind of baked into the lift motor. However, you can determine if that's your bad part and know if you need a new lift motor or not. Because just because you have a lift motor error doesn't mean it's a bad lift motor or a bad potentiometer. It could be the motor control board that's not feeding power to the lift motor to make it go up and down. So to save you from ordering both expensive components, we can at least rule this out. Can we rule out the lift motor itself based on these wires here?
Absolutely.
So these are the main power wires that make it go up and down. Typically, red and white combined are going to make the motor go up, and black and white are going to make the motor go down. So Data's just sticking his ends into the red and the white.
67.4, then we'll go to the black wire.
Keep our white plugged in.
68.
68.
And then we'll go from black to red, and we have 135.
Same rule applies for the lift motor power wires as it does the pod.
Now there is one more test. If you have a treadmill that's blowing the breaker and you unplug your lift motor and it stops blowing the breaker, one thing that you can test is your lift motor to ground. This, in that case, will likely be the problem. There will be a reading there if it's bad, if there is a short.
No reading. I didn't know that. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I did not know that. Okay. So, do we want to dive into how many times have we gotten a call on a treadmill that they say the screen is just not powering on? So, and it usually has to do with the safety key issue. Can we pull the back of this console off quick? And I'm going to get this thing, because we can actually power this thing back on as long as we have power going into the motor control board and the main data wire is going up to the console. Certainly, if we hit start with all this stuff plugged in, what's going to end up happening? Or you're going to get an error code right away, right? But we can at least power this thing on, and typically, right, we won't get an error code. So on some treads you will, some treads you won't.
Well, in this case,
we'll find out.
We'll get exactly what we need.
Okay, so main data wire is still plugged in. I am going to turn this thing back on. And we've got still lights down on the lower board. We've got some beepies up top. Let me see what our main screen looks like. I'm going to lift this up here while we're loading, or while Data's taking the back off. This thing is loading up right now. And we're just getting back to the home screen here. It's initializing, which with the initialization, we might get an error because what it's doing is checking. No, so this is good. We didn't get any errors yet. So as Data is pulling off the back of the console here, I want to show you guys the safety key issue, which is this piece right here. So what we've had before happen is a customer will get a screen like this, emergency stop, even when this is in place. The little tab goes in there, and there's also magnets inside of here too. But we've gotten many calls where people say, hey, I got my safety key in, my emergency stop, but I'm still getting this error. And I want to show you from the back side of the console what that looks like. I need to get one of those little screw guns too, by the way. I'm still doing it old school with a hand screwdriver. You want me to find another screwdriver here? Which, by the way, I'm going to give an unsolicited plug while Data's taking the console off. Data got this tool bag. Our technicians carry these backpacks because it's easy to get, you know, in and out of facilities and people's homes versus wheeling in a big tool bag. I don't even know what brand this is. Tech Pack MC. But I was complimenting him, and for my birthday, my dear mother bought me one. So I can't wait to fill it up with my tools from my old Milwaukee bag, even though that bag is still fine. So,
this one might be easier to get to with
all right, I'm going to take this right here, and I'm going to let Data, this is the power of the live. Sometimes it can be a real stinker to get to those screws up in there. There's one. There we go. And there again, what we're doing is we're opening up the back of this treadmill console here on this Sole F85 in case you have a safety key issue that's coming up that's not allowing you to start the treadmill even with the safety key inserted. So what we're doing right now is we're taking off this side plastic, this little extra fin to be able to take off this whole big plastic housing here and show you a very common issue when it comes to the safety keys. And there again, we've got a spare one sitting over here too that we're going to try and pull some parts from if need be, but I'm hoping we can get both of these up and going and be able to get a customer a great deal on a reconditioned tread, which right now it doesn't look like this thing is reconditionable, but believe it or not, with a new running belt, new drive belt, cleaned up the rollers, some bearings in the rollers, and a new drive motor, we might still be within budget here. Okay, we're opening up the cavity here, and
One more.
I think we got one hiding in there somewhere. Let me put this up. Something's got us. I don't know if I want to rip that.
No.
I thought you pulled that one out. Was there two in there?
There might have been, that might have been what was making it so difficult.
Let me feel it once.
It feels like something metal in there.
Oh, you know what? How many times have we seen that? All right, you want to grab this plastic, she's going to fall. So I can tell there's been a tech that's worked on this before because there was a second screw in the same hole. And boy, if you accidentally do that, you're in big trouble, like getting that thing back out of there. Okay, here we go. Check this out, right underneath of here. That right there is the receiver for the safety key. This tab, when it goes through the top slot, it sits in here. But this one screw on this very thin plastic tab, this tab will break. And this little component right here will actually come loose inside of there. Data, you want to unscrew that? And we're going to mimic the issue. So I've seen both of those little tabs break, and that thing is sitting inside of there, but it's not making a good connection.
So that'll do it.
Okay.
And then you go to put your safety key in.
So then,
Well, this case it's
there you go. Well, it was starting to throw a no safety issue here, so let's pull this back out. You can see right here it's getting loose, and if that little tab breaks, there you go, Data. Put that key back in there. So if that's just loose in there, it's not making a full connection. See that beeping? That's like I'm taking the safety key in and out. So if you get a safety key issue where it says you're looking for the emergency stop, there you go. Look at here. So it's not even a complete tab. And look how thin that is. Those things can break off. And what happens is your safety key goes right in there. Boom. If that's loose inside the console, it's not making good connection, and you're stumped. And here's what happens. You'll have someone come out to your house, a service tech, or you'll just call. You might call a manufacturer, and they might say, well, if it's not working, you're going to need a new console. And then you'll have to buy this whole new panel, and it'll fix your problem. But unbeknownst to you, it was a stupid little tab. So you can if this little tab breaks, you can get a little creative and figure out a way to re-secure that up in there. You know what I did one time? Speaking of hotel room keys, let me pull this out. So what I did, and I think this video is on our channel, I took a hotel room key and I cut a little rectangle out of it. I put some hot glue right here, and I hot glued that room key section right there, and then I took my pocket knife and I just carved a little hole here and here, and then I was able to re-secure it back up in there. because as long as this is held in place, you're good to go. So, and then this thing just plugs in up here. You can always check to make sure, but usually you've got a good connection because, as Data was saying earlier, Sole loves their hot glue on their connections. So more than likely your issue is here. You got some fans in here too. If you do happen to open up your tread, just blow those out of there. These get full of dust and gunk, and you don't want that blowing in your face. But all in all, if you go to replace the hand switches, let's go back up here with these the handlebar switches that on one side you can adjust the speed and one side the elevation. These do go bad. It's a common thing. And what you can do, the wire for that runs right through the neck. And then you got your connection point right here. So you can easily just fish that through and put a new one on. It's held on by one screw on the bottom here. So we want to take that off. In fact, I want to take it off anyway because we can't sell it like this. We want to make sure that these things work. Even though you have other options as far as taking that off.
Oh, that one's even broken.
That one's even broken on there. And you can see how these buttons just deteriorate over time. It's kind of neat to see. When you press the little button, it'll make contact on the little, what's that little thing called on the circuit board?
Contact.
Contact, yeah. But these are pretty cheap parts. You can actually just replace these if you want to, but quite frankly, I wish they wouldn't even put them on there because they're a known issue. You've got a couple spots up on the control board, up on the console where you can change it. You're good to go. I want to show you guys the belly pan real quick here because the belly pan, it drives me nuts. The belly pan. I feel like the belly pan ultimately contributes to a lot of this dust and debris that's inside of here. I think this is a case of a good deed not going unpunished here. So what I'm talking about is when you fold this treadmill up, somewhere along the way in the fitness industry, some engineer thought, you know what would be a great idea to keep the underneath side of the treadmill clean is by putting a thin, crappy plastic belly pan underneath of the tread. Now, in theory, I think this keeps the floor cleaner than anything else. But the dust and debris usually falls from up and lands on top of the running belt, or it's all the junk that's on your shoes. And then it falls on the belt, and the belt is rotating. Well, then what happens is that debris goes around the rear roller on the belt, and then look at all this stuff falling out of there already. Oh, look at that. Now that's all trapped inside here. In fact, I think this stuff. Oh, look at that. I don't think it's a good idea to put that on there. I'd rather have that debris fall on your treadmill mat so you can fold your treadmill up and clean your mat off, because this dust is just being recycled through the treadmill and it's being sucked into that motor cavity and ultimately right there into your filthy drive motor. So I'm not a fan of these. As a matter of fact, whenever we get called out to someone's house to put a new belt and deck on, and they have one of these ridiculous belly pans, we usually take them off, and for good reason. It's not because we're lazy and we don't want to put it back on. It's doing more harm than good, I feel. And I'd love to have a debate with a treadmill manufacturer engineer to tell me why it's a good idea to put a lint trap that is underneath your tread that no one is going to take this off and clean. So, same underneath here. Same deal. Belly pan, full of debris. Look at that. Look at all of this that's just trapped underneath of there. You're going to be constantly battling these belly pans. Oh, terrible idea. Take that off of there. Put a rubber mat underneath your treadmill so you're not dealing with someone else's dead cat that's underneath your tread. I don't know, Data. I think on round 2, what we're going to do is we're going to order some parts. We know we need a running belt. We know we need a drive belt. You want to pull that tab down. Oh, and by the way, leave that folded up real quick. When you pull that lever there to fold your treadmill down, it pulls this tab in, this little guy here, to allow that to go together and have this slide down. There's a lot of weight pulling this down, so you should always push this up a little bit so that easily goes in. One common mistake people make is they don't take the pressure off and they yank on that handle, and that handle breaks or the cable breaks. And so just push up on it to take some pressure off, and then it'll easily fold back down and you won't have to mess with a whole new folding switch handle mechanism. Well, the stage is set. We have officially proven to everyone that we know how to destroy a treadmill. But on the next vid, we're going to get some parts coming in. I don't know if it'll be the next vid, but we'll link it to this video. And what we'll do is we're going to rebuild this guy. And then, you know what, we'll tally up all the cost. What the consumer would have spent on average to actually rebuild this and get it back up and running. And then we'll let you guys decide if it makes sense to spend the money to fix your Sole F85 or F85, or if it just makes sense to go buy a new one. So, you got anything else for everybody out there, Data?
I think that was it.
All right, well listen, remember guys, don't just be super, be super duper.